All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Mr. Fancy's Macroeconomics class. We're in our Romeoville Unit 6, which is Module 36, the last module of this unit from our book. And we're talking about some different philosophies here, the modern consensus versus the old macroeconomics. We're going to talk about expansionary monetary policies, expansionary fiscal policies. What can we do in the long run with monetary and fiscal policies? Um, should monetary policies be used in a discretionary way, like setting up central bank targets and assess asset prices or unconventional policies? So we're going to talk about that today. So once again, we're going to list and describe events of the modern macroeconomics and explain the main reasons or the main disputes that's going on between them. So if we look, there's a lot of different ideas here. The first one says here, um, is economic monetary policy helpful in fighting recessions? Okay. The classical economics really didn't believe that monetary policies would reverse a recession. Keynesians thought it could have limited effectiveness when we think about the expansionary monetary policies. And once again, we're talking about expansionary monetary policies. We're talking about um, buying in the open market, reducing reserve requirement, or reducing the discount rate. And we think of some philosophies here, Milton Friedman and other monetarists. They were convinced that monetary policies is effective. Most macroeconomics now agree that monetary policies could be used to shift the aggregate demand curve and reduce economic instability. The classical view, though, the classic view that changes in the money supply affects only aggregate prices, not really aggregate output. Um, so that's a different ideology. Remember, the classical economic idea is that the short run uh, aggregate supply curve straight up and down. Um, so the view once held by some Keynesian by some Keynesian economists, they've changed, and the idea of money supply has little effect. But now it's generally agreed that monetary policy is ineffective only in the cases of the liquidity trap. So it's kind of certain different philosophies here. When we think of the second one here, is expansionary fiscal policy effective in fighting recessions? And when we think of fiscal policy, expansionary fiscal policies, those again are cutting taxes or increasing government spending. Right. So if we cut taxes, that puts more money in consumers' pockets to buy stuff. And then if the government buys things, that's that G part of C plus I plus G plus N exports. So a lot of the classical macroeconomics economists were more opposed to fiscal expansion than monetary expansion. Keynesian economists, on the other hand, gave fiscal policy a central role in fighting recession. Monetarists argue that fiscal policy was ineffective as long as the money supply was held constant, but the strong view, but that strong view has become relatively rare. Okay. Most macroeconomics now agree that fiscal policy, like monetary policy, can shift the aggregate demand curve, right? That's most macroeconomists. Most macroeconomics also agree that the government should not seek to balance the budget regardless of the state of the economy. They agree that the role of the budget is or her budget as an automatic stabilizer, sort of like you can't have a balanced budget every year. It's over the longevity of it. So you might have a budget surplus, then a budget shortage. Like you might be bouncing back and forth for a while. Okay. So that's kind of that idea. And then it says here, can monetary and or fiscal policy reduce unemployment in the long run? In the long run. And so when we think of classical macroeconomists don't believe that the government um, could do anything about unemployment. Some Keynesian economists move to the opposite extreme, arguing that expansionary policies would be used to achieve a permanent low unemployment, uh, perhaps at the cost of some inflation. So if we go back to the old Phillips curve, um, to reduce unemployment, we may have to be willing to accept inflation. And monetarists believe that unemployment could not be kept below the natural rate of unemployment. Like if the natural rate of unemployment is between 4 to 6%, that long run we couldn't change that natural rate of unemployment because you always having cyclical unemployment, you always have that frictional unemployment. Okay. Um, and then it says here, should fiscal policies be used in a discretionary way? Today, most economics economists, I'm sorry, believe that tax cuts and spending, increased government spending, are at least somewhat effective in increasing aggregate demand. Many, but not all, economists believe that discretionary fiscal policy is usually counterproductive. Remember, we've talked about the lag. The lags in in adjusting fiscal policy means that all too often, policies intended to fight a slump end up intensifying a boom. So, because it takes so long for them to pass votes or to do things, that sometimes we're out of that recession or heading upward, and then we do this uh, thing. They vote on something, and, So as a result, a lot of economists. Consensus gives monetary policy the lead role in economic stabilizing. Discretionary fiscal policies play the leading role only in special circumstances when monetary policies are ineffective, such as those facing countries like Japan or Venezuela or something like that. We know in Japan, their interest rates were at or near zero, and that was creating that liquidity trap. We know that Japan's their deficit spending is a huge percentage of their GDP. Okay, and then the last one here says, uh, should monetary policy be used in a discretionary way? Okay, so the classical economists don't think that monetary policy should be used to fight recession. Keynesians um, uh, didn't oppose discretionary monetary policy, but they're skeptical about its effectiveness. And those monetarists um, argue that discretionary monetary policies was doing more harm than good, that is creating too much inflation. So today, that's some of the old classical thinking, and today we see that there's a broader consensus on these points that monetary policy should play the main role in stabilizing, that the central bank should be independent, insulated from political pressures in order to avoid that. Remember that political business cycle that we talked about, that politicians running for reelection will try to get more money in people's pockets and do fiscal policies to help them get reelected. That discretionary fiscal policy should be used sparingly, both because of political or policy lags and because the risk of those political business cycles. So that's something that people still concerned with. So the argument of expansionary policies, will that create more inflation? And it goes back to the Phillips curve. If we try to reduce unemployment, are we going to create larger inflation? So when we think of this whole idea of supply side economics and what we could do to to use more of the aggregate supply curve, or the supply, that was like the Reaganomics idea. Um, and if we give these huge tax cuts to big firms, will that help the economy? Will that help create more jobs and lower the uh, inflationary rate? So here, the core of the supply side economics view of economic policy was the belief that reducing the tax rate, and so increasing the incentive to work and invest, would be a powerful, a positive effect for growth. But most economists agree that tax cuts increase incentives to work and invest, but at the same time, the incentive, if we lower the tax rates, it really plays a role in our government spending. So a famous curve that they like to use is the Laffer curve, where it shows um, cutting. If you look at the Laffer curve on the bottom here, this is the tax rate and the tax revenue. So it's essentially saying if we have a low rate, like where is the optimal spot to have taxes so that the government can collect the greatest amount of tax revenue? Um, do we, raise the rates or lower the rates? What are we going to do? If we're going to raise the rates here, and for the wealthy, lower the rates? That's kind of this catch 22 of where is the best place to stimulate the economy to try to have growth depending upon tax rates. Like we might be better off having higher rates for lower income people and lesser rates for higher income people, or vice versa. Um, but so many people today always look at the people not paying their fair share. Well, the question always becomes, well, what determines your fair share? And then, what are you getting back from the economy? Some economists believe that people that benefit from government spending should pay a greater portion of taxes. So that's really, those are different arguments that have continued on through my entire life and probably through your entire life. So, should monetary policy be used, once again, as we talked about before? I go through these all again, you know, in a discretionary way. Um, and once again, monetary policy should play a role in stabilizing. The central bank should be independent. The discretionary fiscal policy should be used in a sparing way so we don't have um, uh, too much money that ends up creating too much inflation. Okay. Once again, how this debate has continued on and on and on. Should the central bank be given a target? And we've talked about these targets before, of trying to place a target of where we want to have the money supply, where do we want the interest rates, a target so that we don't put out too much money. And lately, we've been doing about a 3% increase in the money supply, is kind of a central target, or 2 to 3%. All right. So, you know, a clean little secret of modern macroeconomics is how much consensus economists have reached over the past 70 years. And they haven't, a lot of arguments here, a lot of arguments of where they should be, where we should be. Every economist has a different philosophy. You get 20 different economists in a room and get 20 different ideas of what should happen in the economy. Okay. Now, um, once again, we want to create central banking targets. Okay, so if we go back here, we want to have central banking targets. Okay, so, the federal bank does not announce a target rate of inflation, although some believe that they about 2 to 3%. We also, when we think about assets, so should the central bank manage asset prices? Should the federal Fed be proactive in influencing the stock market, real estate market, or any other assets markets? If the Fed thought the stock market was at an unsustainable high level, should the Fed intervene and try to slow it down? Some people don't want the Fed to intervene in the market. Yet, if the stock market bubble bursts like we saw in 1929 or in 2008, the damage can be very painful, right? And really hurt the society. And then, why should the central bank do, or what should the central bank do when conventional policies has reached limits? Well, desperate times require desperate measures. And we know in 2008, when the financial system seemed to be on the verge of, of collapse, the Fed took some steps that don't normally appear in the Fed playbook. Some of these uh, bailouts and things like that that we normally don't do. Okay, so there hasn't been a huge consensus over the economy over years. So once again, understanding what should we have monetary or fiscal policies in place only to help get rid of unemployment? What should we do? And once again, we'll never, excuse me, we'll never know exactly because once again the debate over um, what's the role of the federal government in fiscal policy and what's the role of the Federal Reserve, and you'll always have excuse me, you'll have progressive and conservative ideas always butting heads on economic philosophies. Demand side economics does work, and we've seen supply side economics. It can work. They both can work, but it's about accountability and transparency. That's the thing we need more of. Ooh, excuse me. All right. Woo. Sorry. All right. Well, with that being said, we're going to go ahead and this is the last module of this unit. And we'll probably have a test then here on this last module. And then we have for the 2020 AP exam, we have one more unit for that. But in other years, we'd have two more units for that. But otherwise, we'll talk to you guys. I hope everyone's staying safe and practicing your social distances. And hey, have a great day.